The South China Sea, calm, endless, and deceptively peaceful. Beneath its shimmering surface lies one of the world's most contested frontiers. Every ripple, every radar ping, and every patrol tells a story of power, pride, and peril. It's here, among these waters, that a single encounter between a Chinese Navy helicopter and a US Allied patrol plane would spark headlines around the globe, and remind the world that the sky above the South China Sea is no place for mistakes. The day began like any other routine patrol. A Philippine surveillance aircraft prepared for takeoff from an airbase near Luzon, the crew running standard checks. The mission sounded simple. Document Chinese activity near Scarborough Shoal, a small but strategically crucial reef within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. On board, a handful of journalists and Coast Guard officers, their cameras ready. As the engines roared to life, the gray horizon promised nothing unusual. But everyone knew what this flight meant. In the South China Sea, there is no such thing as a routine mission. The aircraft climbed through layers of clouds, leveling off around 700 feet. Below, the turquoise water gradually darkened into deep blue, a silent expanse dotted with ships and shadows. Somewhere down there were Chinese vessels, perhaps Coast Guard cutters or naval ships patrolling what Beijing calls its sovereign waters. The flight crew knew the pattern well. China has built artificial islands, stationed radar installations, and increased patrols across these disputed regions. Scarborough Shoal is no exception. For the Philippines, this is home. For China, this is history, and for the world, it's a potential flashpoint. Minutes turned into hours. Then, at around midday, the radar pinged. A fast-moving contact appeared, closing in from the west. The crew adjusted the monitors, scanning the horizon. And then, out of the mist, it appeared, a gray helicopter, its rotors slicing the humid air, bearing the unmistakable markings of the People's Liberation Army Navy. At first, it kept its distance, hovering several hundred meters away. But soon it began to close in. The hum of the helicopter's rotors grew louder, vibrating through the patrol plane's thin metal frame. Within moments, the two aircraft were separated by barely 10 feet, close enough for the crew to see the pilot's visor gleam in the sunlight. The Philippine pilot's voice crackled over the radio, "You are flying too close. You are endangering our crew." But there was no response. The Chinese helicopter maintained its course, matching the plane's every movement, hovering dangerously close in turbulent air. For 30 long minutes, the two aircraft danced an aerial duel, a silent, tense exchange where one mistake could have sent both machines spiraling into the sea. Below them, the South China Sea shimmered like glass, indifferent to the humans challenging each other above it. On board the Philippine aircraft, the journalists filmed every second. Their footage would later show just how close the encounter had been, the helicopter's rotor wash shaking the patrol plane, the horizon tilting as the pilot fought to keep control. This wasn't the first time such an incident had occurred, but it was among the closest and most dangerous. For months, Chinese vessels had been accused of using water cannons and military-grade lasers against Philippine ships near disputed reefs. Helicopter interceptions were a new level of escalation. The world was watching, and Washington would not remain silent. Within hours of the footage going public, the United States condemned the maneuver as reckless and provocative. The State Department's spokesperson stated that these actions endanger the lives of aircrew and threaten peace and stability in the region. Beijing's response was swift and unapologetic. Chinese officials claimed the Philippine aircraft had illegally intruded into what they called Chinese airspace, asserting that the helicopter's actions were professional and restrained. In other words, both sides believed they were in the right. To understand why this confrontation matters, we have to go back a few years, to a legal battle fought not in the skies, but in international courts. In 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague ruled in favor of the Philippines, declaring that China's sweeping, 9-line, claim over the South China Sea had no legal basis. The tribunal stated that Scarborough Shoal, among other reefs, lay well within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. But China refused to recognize the ruling. Instead, Beijing doubled down, deploying Coast Guard ships, naval units, and, over time, even building artificial islands equipped with runways and missile defenses. What began as a dispute over fishing rights had evolved into a test of military power and diplomatic will. Fast forward to today, and every encounter in this region is a statement, a signal sent not just to Manila, but to Washington, Tokyo, and the world. The U.S., bound by its mutual defense treaty with the Philippines, continues to conduct joint patrols and freedom of navigation operations, missions that challenge China's territorial claims. Beijing sees these flights as provocations, Washington calls them the defense of international law. Caught between two superpowers, the Philippines walks a delicate line, asserting its sovereignty while avoiding open conflict. Inside the cockpit, as the Chinese helicopter hovered perilously close, the Philippine crew kept their composure. The pilot later described the experience, "We could see their faces. The rotors were so close that turbulence was shaking us violently. One wrong move could have been fatal. At that altitude, even a small collision could send both aircraft crashing into the sea." But neither side backed down. It was a standoff measured in meters, and in pride. Back on land, the footage spread like wildfire. News outlets across Asia replayed the dramatic clips. Analysts debated what message China was sending. Some said it was a warning, that Beijing would no longer tolerate foreign patrols over its claimed territories. Others saw it as a test of boundaries, a psychological game designed to wear down the Philippines' resolve. But what no one could ignore was the danger. Military experts warned that one close encounter could spiral into disaster. A collision, even accidental, might trigger a chain reaction pulling in allies, and perhaps the world's two largest powers. In Washington, officials reiterated that any armed attack on Philippine forces would invoke mutual defense obligations. The message was clear, the U.S. would stand by its ally. In Beijing, state media countered that China will safeguard its territorial integrity at all costs. The standoff wasn't just in the skies anymore, it was playing out in press briefings, diplomatic halls, and the minds of millions watching from afar. Days later, the Philippines launched another aerial patrol, this time with additional aircraft, accompanied by international journalists. It was a message of defiance, they would not be intimidated. From the air, they documented Chinese ships clustered near the shoal, a visible reminder that Beijing's presence had only grown. But no helicopters appeared that day. The skies were silent, the sea deceptively calm. Analysts now describe the South China Sea as a tinderbox. More than $3 trillion in global trade passes through these waters each year. Beneath the sea floor lie vast reserves of oil and gas. And above all, the region holds immense strategic importance. Whoever controls it controls a gateway between the Pacific and Indian Oceans. For China, dominance here is about reclaiming what it sees as its historical territory. For the US and its allies, it's about maintaining the balance of power and keeping vital sea lanes open. As tension rises, even small confrontations take on new meaning. A helicopter shadowing a patrol plane may seem minor, but in the high-stakes world of military signaling, it's a move on the chessboard that everyone notices. Each incident adds to the pile of grievances and warnings. Each one tests the limits of patience, professionalism, and restraint. Inside China's leadership circles, the calculus is complex. Every intercept, every patrol, serves a purpose, to show resolve, to demonstrate capability, and to remind the region of Beijing's reach. But there's also risk, a single misjudgment could ignite a crisis that no one truly wants. Even Chinese analysts quietly acknowledge that the growing frequency of such encounters increases the chance of an accident. Meanwhile, in Manila, ordinary citizens watch these developments with mixed emotions, pride in their soldiers, fear of escalation, frustration that diplomacy seems powerless. In interviews, crew members from the intercepted flight said they were trained for such encounters, but not for this close. "It was the most dangerous moment I've faced in years," one officer said. "But we had to keep flying. Turning back would mean surrendering our rights." As the world debates, the ocean remains silent. At dusk, the sun sets over Scarborough Shoal, waves lapping against coral, shadows lengthening across the water. From space, it's just a speck on the map. Yet for two nations, it represents something far larger: identity, sovereignty, pride. Weeks after the incident, new footage surfaced, another close pass, this time involving Chinese and US aircraft over the East China Sea. The pattern is clear: Beijing's forces are growing bolder. Each encounter follows the same script: shadow, warn, approach, and retreat. The message is unmistakable: China will challenge, and it will not back down. But history offers a warning of its own. In April 2001, a U.S. Navy EP-3 reconnaissance plane collided with a Chinese fighter jet near Hainan Island, killing the Chinese pilot and forcing the U.S. aircraft to make an emergency landing. For days, the world held its breath. That single accident sparked a major diplomatic standoff, one that took months to resolve. Military experts now fear that the same could happen again, only this time, with far higher stakes. For the Philippines and its allies, the goal is deterrence, to show presence, to assert freedom of navigation, to prevent Beijing from cementing its claims through constant occupation. For China, it's about sending a clear message: we are here, we will defend what we believe is ours. Two forces, two narratives, and one narrow sky. As night falls, the South China Sea glows faintly under the moonlight. On the horizon, ships move like silent sentinels. Above, unseen aircraft patrol, their lights flickering like distant stars. Somewhere out there, another encounter may already be brewing. And once again, pilots will look across the cockpit glass and see the face of a rival, just meters away, both sides hoping that this time, it doesn't go too far. Because in the South China Sea, a single mistake isn't just a story. It's a spark that could set the world on fire. The ocean sleeps beneath the weight of nations, the skies hum with the sound of vigilance, and somewhere between courage and caution, history writes its next line.